Hi and welcome back again. In this video, we'll be looking at a few words having to do with clothing and making deliveries. There are two important liquid verbs that help when we're talking about delivering things. And as liquid verbs, we find that there's some stem change in the aorist tense and in the future tense. But in the first aorist, we see no sigma. So it's a first aorist verb, but the stem change marks the fact that it's aorist rather than the sigma tense marker. One of these verbs is fero, which means I carry, or I lift, or I bear. Metaphorically, this can mean to endure or survive, or to tolerate or support something, very much like the verb bear means in English. The future and aorist stems here are actually borrowed from other verbs. So the future looks quite different. The stem is ois, and the first person singular is oiso, I will carry. The liquid aorist is also quite different, and we have the stem enenk, which in the first person singular with the augment becomes enenka. The aorist passive is enechthein, which, as you can see, is from that same enenk root, but the kappa at the end and the gamma have combined in front of the theta to become a he. The other verb that's useful here is airo, which can mean to take up or take away or remove. The future here involves the iota disappearing, and the stem of all of the secondary tenses is just ar. So the future is aro, I will take up or I will remove. The liquid aorist is era. Again, notice there's stem change, but the use of first declension endings, the alpha. And the aorist passive uses that same ar stem to become erthein. Another verb that's useful when we're making deliveries is dechomai, which means I receive. Here remember that he is one of the palatal type stops in our square of stops, or a kappa class stop. And so he plus a sigma tense marker will become xi. So the first aorist here is, in the middle, edexamen. Pempo means I send. And here again, remember that the P, which is a labial class stop, when combined with a sigma becomes psi. So the first aorist will be epempsa, and the future, I will send, will be pempso. On the other hand, when you have the P in front of a theta, as in the aorist passive, the P softens, as usual, and becomes a phi. And so we have epempthein. The basic Greek garment for both men and women was hachiton, or tunic. This is a third declension noun with the real stem chiton, and so the genitive will be chitonos. The only difference between this garment's appearance for men and for women is that for women it was much longer. It would be floor length, and often the top of it would actually be folded over to almost resemble a separate shirt over top. But it was all one cylinder of fabric with just the top folded back down, and then often tied just under the breasts for women. For men, it would be a much shorter garment, but again, just basically a tube of fabric tied this time around the waist. And in the top image here with the green background, we can see a man's chiton with the one shoulder unfastened. This would be a common way of wearing it for workers or slaves if they were working hard. For men in more formal situations, you would have both sleeves done up, and it would look much more like a t-shirt on top. For a woman, the longer tunic could be called hopeplos, or dress. And this is similar to the term hestole. All of these are basically terms for different styles of long tunic with the same sort of fold over on top. The main outer garment in Greek dress for both men and women was ta himation, which meant essentially a cloak. The himation was a large rectangle of cloth which could be wrapped various ways around the shoulders and body, sometimes held in place by being wrapped around one arm at the end. Interestingly, this is the garment that Jesus removes before washing Peter's feet in John's Gospel. And so, unlike some of the depictions we see, the Gospel doesn't actually depict Jesus taking off his tunic and certainly not being naked in a loincloth. What John says is that he takes off his cloak, and the presumption is he's still wearing underneath it his short tunic. The picture at top here with the red background shows how a woman might wear her himation wrapped loosely around her shoulders and body over top of her peplos or large chiton. Hechlamus was a shorter cloak or cape. The third declension word has a real stem, chlamud, and the genitive then would be chlamudos. The chlamus was shorter than the himation and was pinned at the neck or shoulder instead of being held in place by wrapping. It was worn by men, very seldom of women, and especially by hunters or soldiers, presumably because it allowed freedom of movement for both arms, where the himation generally had to be held in place by one arm, which at least was somewhat limited in motion.